Welcome to Ring of Fire. I'm Farron Cousins, sitting in for Mike Papantonio. Here's what's coming up on today's show. The Justice Department has completed its probe into the Ferguson, Missouri Police Department, and the results of this investigation haven't surprised anyone. We'll bring you the details. And when you get injured on the job, you want to believe that your employer's workers' comp program will help take care of you. But state legislatures have quietly been taking that safety net away piece by piece, and we'll tell you how that happened. And corporations are pulling in record profits, sitting on record amounts of cash, but they aren't spending that money on raises or benefits for their workers. We'll tell you where that money is actually going. We have all that and more coming up, but right now, you've just stepped into the Ring of Fire.
You can't change Washington from the inside. You can only change it from the outside.
Grand jury secrecy rules.
For political gain.
The press can find out.
That has nothing to do with politics, but go ahead.
It wouldn't bother me.
Oops.
The Department of Justice has been investigating the actions and activities of the Ferguson Police Department following a grand jury's decision to not indict Officer Darren Wilson after he shot and killed Michael Brown, an unarmed African American. The Justice Department was looking to see if Wilson's attitude was the default for the police force, and sure enough, their investigation validated the fears of the African American community, and I have blogger and author Chauncey DeVega with me to tell us about the results of that report. Chauncey, let's dive right into this Department of Justice report. I mean, it's horrible news. Again, not surprising. I mean, we could tell there was a problem, but this really shows us just how bad the problem of racism has been for this Ferguson Police Department.
I mean, it's stupefying on one level, but wholly expected on the other. Once again, as I'm fond of saying on ChaunceyDeVega.com when I sit here with you guys on Ring of Fire, racism is not an opinion. Once again, we have empirical evidence that validates the lived life experiences of black and brown folks in this country. Reading that report, it includes a panoply of overt racism, from KKK-like emails to harassing black and brown folk for simply walking down the street. And that's the cultural and institutional context, by the way, that led to the events which led to the killing of Michael Brown by Darren Wilson. We have court officials in their own private emails, again, making racist comments about black and brown folk. If you do the math about these fines, because it really is just a debt protection, almost debt peonage-like racket, where you have a moral hazard where the police who are supposed to protect and serve instead harass black folk in that community, that it comes out to about $200 per family in fines in that community, where the police are enriching themselves by harassing and giving unfair tickets to black and brown folk. Never mind the data about the police putting dogs on people, that black folk are disproportionately stopped and harassed, and that African Americans in Ferguson have been subjected to gross violations of their personal liberty and are grossly, you're looking at the data, I think it's about 90% of black folk, or rather African Americans are 90% more likely to be victims of police brutality than whites in that community. It's simply stupefying.
So this is systemic. This is not, like Darren Wilson, just a bad apple. This is really ingrained within that entire, Ferguson Police Department. And it should be pointed out, I mean, the Department of Justice review here was just for what was happening in Ferguson. But don't you feel like this really is just a microcosm of, we can take these findings and apply them to a lot of other police departments across this country, can't we?
Absolutely. We have, again, systemic evidence of racism and inequality at every level of the criminal justice system in this country. So we have Ferguson, but there are Fergusons all over the country. Let us not forget that in New York City and other major cities, these stop and frisk programs, which the courts have ruled to be illegal because, again, they disproportionately target African American and Latino youth, when in fact it's white folks who are much more likely to have contraband, weapons, and drugs on their person. And this is, again, according to the DOJ's data on stop and frisk. And we also have to have some historical context here. Looking at the DOJ report really reminds me of looking at the Kerner Commission report from the 1960s after the major urban rebellions in this country in response to Jim and Jane Crow and systemic white supremacy. So these are long-standing grievances that, again, black and brown folk, we are not crazy when we say that the police harass us. Black and brown folk and our white allies who have been on the front lines with us fighting police brutality and prejudice in the criminal justice system, we are not crazy. So now you have the data. The question becomes, what do you do with it?
Well, it is remarkable. You even have Fox News right now who has said, like, wow, yeah, it certainly is dangerous to be an African American in the city of Ferguson. When they, who have fought any charge of race-motivated anything, are finally willing to admit, okay, wow, this is a bad, report. It shows that not only have they been wrong and that their Republican followers have been wrong, but do you feel like that might maybe now change the conversation and we can really begin to dig down into the heart of what the hell is going on here?
Honestly, I'm a bit of a cynic on this one because we have, again, good, solid empirical evidence that when our white brothers and sisters are made aware that the criminal justice system is not just unfair but racist against African Americans, they are just as likely, if not more so, to support those same policies. So we have a deep cultural history in this country where black and brown folk, and in particular African Americans, are overly identified with crime because of stereotypes in the mass media. And I think it was Gore Vidal who said America doesn't have a memory from last Tuesday. So you're going to see this happen. You're going to have other events where you have that poor child in Cleveland who was killed by the police, and the police in the city say, oh, he was basically killed himself by standing in a park. We have folks killed carrying guns in stores. We have homeless folk being shot dead by the cops. We don't even have proper data. Again, and a lot of our brothers and sisters in the American public don't understand this. Most police don't even report accurate data about the number of people they kill. So on one hand, you have the rhetoric of surprise that, oh my God, how could this happen in Ferguson, when in reality it's happening all over the country. But then you have the other hand playing a sort of three-card Monte game. It's almost like a con job on the American people, saying, oh, well, that happened. Oh, we're just going to go along about our business. And the next time we'll treat it like a crisis. So it's this crisis model when instead we need to be dealing with institutional power.
Well, you just brought up a phenomenal point, is the fact that they don't necessarily keep official records on how many people they've killed. They're not even required to do that. It was only recently in the last few months that new legislation was proposed that would make the Department of Justice and the FBI have to occasionally check in with police departments and say, hey, can you tell us how many unarmed people have died while either, being detained or in custody? I mean, that is mind-blowing. Here we are. This was introduced in 2014 at the end of the year 2014, and we don't even have numbers on how many people these police officers are killing every year. I mean, if that doesn't highlight a major flaw in the way these systems are designed, then I don't know what does. And just real quick, we've got under a minute. We have this report from the DOJ. What are they going to do about it?
Well, that's the question. We would like to see the Ferguson Police Department sued by the Department of Justice and shut down. Again, interesting asterisk that Darren Wilson came from a local police department right nearby that was shut down for police brutality and racism. But that's not going to happen. The police chief, I believe, was just on TV a few hours ago. This is a Friday, basically saying, oh, we're just going to look into it, and I'll read the report carefully. Michael Brown's family is suing them. They're probably going to win, fingers crossed, a civil case. But again, this is deep systemic white supremacy. And as we began with, talking about the Kerner Commission, think about this. Those black and brown folk were not rioting in the streets of Ferguson. The police were rioting against their own community. And there's, again, going back to the idea of a moral hazard. A moral hazard basically means a conflict of interest. How can police serve and protect when they are incentivized financially to violate the rights of black people in Ferguson? And that's the key question.
And what's going to probably end up happening, the same thing they do in churches when they find instances of priests abusing young boys, cover it up, transfer the person to a new district, and that's the end of it. They start a new life to redo the same thing somewhere else. Unfortunately, we are out of time. This is everybody needs to get out there, read this Department of Justice report. Go to ChaunceyDeVega.com. Read your stuff. Chauncey DeVega podcast. It's great stuff. Everybody needs to be paying attention. And thank you for joining us today to talk about this.
Thank you for having me.
Nearly every company in America with more than a handful of employees has a poster hanging somewhere in the building extolling the virtues of their workers' compensation policy. But these policies aren't necessarily the result of companies trying to do right by their employees. They are mandated by law in most instances. And just like every law out there, corporations are using their money and influence to weaken these worker protections. Joining me now to explain what's happening is Michael Burg. Michael, ProPublica just came out with this great new series on workers' compensation laws, where it's come from, where it's going, and the sad state of what has happened to it. As an attorney, I know you're very familiar with workers' compensation claims, with the way the law works. But just kind of, take us through this story a little bit and tell us what's going on.
Well, it is a very sad story for the workers of America. We have a very large workers' comp department in our law firm, and what happened in the 1920s was everybody recognized that there was a mutual benefit of having a workers' compensation law put into effect that would protect the companies from civil lawsuits, but would allow the workers who are injured on the job to get fair compensation and be paid lost wages if, in fact, they were hurt on the job. And it worked for many, many, many years. But what's happened over the last 5 to 10 years is the corporations, while they still want immunity from being sued, which is a whole nother topic we can get into, because some of the gross negligence that occurs in the workplace is so outrageous that they shouldn't have the immunity. But not only do they want to keep the immunity, but now they want the worker not to get the benefits they're entitled to, whether that be a permanent partial disability in which they are permanently disabled, or whether it be a wage loss. And it's been going state by state, and it's been unbelievably horrible. We're going back to the days in which the workers are so oppressed that their wages are low, that their working conditions are horrible, and now when they get hurt, they're not going to get fair compensation.
And, this is another one of those laws or initiatives, I guess you'd call it, that's kind of been put in place by ALEC. We have state chambers of commerce involved in weakening these protections for American workers. And it really is quite simple. The current arrangement, I guess, as they call it, a gentleman's agreement, is that if I get hurt on the job, I break my arm, I'm not going to sue you. In return, you're just going to, make sure that I keep my benefits, that I'm taken care of. Once everything's healed up, everything goes back to normal. And now they want to take that away. If you get hurt on the job, sorry, that's your fault. That's your responsibility. Don't expect us to continue paying you or give you any benefits. And when you heal up, maybe you'll still have a job. Maybe we've replaced you. I mean, is that kind of what we're seeing at this point?
It is, but it's even worse than that, Farron, because many times people get hurt on the job. For example, we see cases in which safety gears or safety locks are disabled by the employer. And so people end up getting their hand cut off, or they end up getting their arm cut in a punch press. Or they're in a truck that the tires are bald and the trucking company is not taking care of the maintenance of it. And then the poor worker or the driver who gets hurt, then they can't sue their employer for the gross negligence or reckless conduct for removing safety locks. Or safety barriers, or bald tires, or not keeping the brakes aligned properly, or make sure that they're working. And so what the worker had been getting is, I'm going to get your medical bills paid. If you're disabled, we're going to pay for part of that so you get a part of your salary. And you're right, the Chamber of Commerce. And here's where we're headed. I think it's important. And I want to tell the workers of America that you do need to unite. Because right now we need the labor unions to get more aggressive. We need the labor unions. We're going through what happened in the 1900s to the 1920s, in which we need to fight for the workers of the world, because the workers in this country right now, based on ALEC and the corporations and the chamber, basically they're being left on their own and without any benefits. And they're doing that to increase the profits, the outrageous profits that these companies are making. We see cases all the time of people who are injured, on oil and gas rigs here, and people whose lives are. We have a case where this gentleman was crushed because of the gross negligence. And even in Colorado, we don't have an exception for gross negligence. What we need is a workers' comp law that says if there's gross negligence, you can sue that employer for what they do if they don't have the proper safety equipment or safety training on the rig. And it's going the other way. And it's not going to stop. unless the people stand up and make it stop.
And, one of the worst things about it, too, is that you would think as we move forward as a society, we are able to keep people safer today than we were yesterday. But in this era of corporate greed, where greed is not only rewarded, but it's triumphed, it's talked about as if it's this great asset for your company to be greedy. We are starting to see more and more cases of just downright corporate negligence. You brought up the great point of the oil fields, the oil rig workers. With the Deepwater Horizon, we know for a fact that company cut corners in safety measures, and that is specifically what led to the disaster in the Gulf of Mexico that claimed 11 lives. We know that. I mean, this is not speculation. Corners are being cut all over the place, and the workers are the only ones paying the price. And here we have judges who hear these cases that say that these cuts in workers' compensation benefits are so deep that they border on inhumane.
Right, and those are the quotes. But I want to follow up on your point, which is a good one, Farron. Is this? Here you have companies who are now basically getting immunity. And that immunity or reduced benefits paid to workers only encourages the safety cuts. It encourages them not to worry about their workers anymore, because when they look at the bottom line, the cost of the safety that they have to put in there, they figure, well, so what? We have people dying on the platforms, getting crushed on our oil rigs, not maintaining our trucks on the road so that our drivers are safe. They're able to look at it and go, you know what, from a dollars and cents standpoint, we're not going to make sure safety is and the OSHA rules are even followed. And because we know that we're not going to be held responsible. It's all about accountability. And if for example, we have cases, people are blown up on these well sites, and sometimes they're caused by third-party contractors who are negligent, who you might be able to sue. And those cases are worth millions of dollars if someone is badly burned, someone's burned over 65% of their body. But if the employer does it, and they do it in North Dakota, where they've just changed the law in 2012 and 2013 because of their oil and gas boom, the employer basically gets away with it. And who pays? Is the taxpayers pay, because those people end up on Social Security disability, they end up on welfare, because the company is not held accountable. That's the problem. And really, we need a revolution in this country of working people standing up and not be willing to do this, and throwing out the bums who are making these changes to the law and are injuring our workers, which is the backbone of this country. What made this country great is those people that the blue-collar worker, the worker who put their hands and dug deep to make this country great. And now what are we doing? We're punishing them and allowing the corporate entities to run this country, not only in the federal government, but in state by state, and eliminating the benefits that have been going on since the 1920s.
And, because of this corporate negligence, the attitude that corporate America has, what you do both here on Free Speech and, more importantly, every day with your law firm is so important for us. And Michael, thank you for fighting the good fight and for telling us this story today.
Thank you, Farron.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Ring of Fire. Swiss banking giant UBS has been in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons in recent years. From their practice of teaching the 1% how to hide their money offshore to avoid paying taxes, to their collusion with drug cartels, it seems like UBS just can't stop breaking the law. And the latest scam that's been uncovered could be one of the most disgusting to date. And I have attorney Peter Mougey here to tell us all about it. Peter, UBS banking giant has found itself in some, I guess, pretty hot water down there in Puerto Rico, and I'm not necessarily talking about the beaches. Tell us exactly what UBS has been up to when it comes to scamming Puerto Rican citizens there.
You know, it's like Groundhog Day. We get another one of these stories every couple of years, and you wonder, is Wall Street ever going to figure this out? Are regulators ever going to put the clamps on these guys? Here's what you got. You have UBS Puerto Rico that has 23 closed-end funds. Closed-end funds trade like stocks. There's actually share prices for each share, and investors buy shares similar to a stock, but it also shares some similarities with a mutual fund in that the closed-end fund holds numerous investments. And inside of these closed-end funds that UBS underwrites are individual bonds predominantly. And those bonds is where the trouble begins with these funds. Now, first of all, they're down by about 50–60%. Remember, bonds are the foundation or the structure of your portfolio. They're your safe money. It's not where you go take a lot of risk. Bonds are usually what retirees buy to help provide income in retirement, pay the electric bill, pay the car, pay the regular monthly nuts. And that's what these funds were designed to do. And UBS pitches these and markets these as preservation of capital that provide income. So UBS fills these bonds with fill the bonds funds with bonds that they have significant conflicts of interest with the issuers. Let me give you an example. The ERS, the Puerto Rican retirement system, is, for all practical purposes, insolvent. Most retirement systems are funded, which is an actuarial ratio, a funding ratio, about 40–50%. Like Detroit's one of the worst ones in the U.S., and they're funded at about 30–40%. The retirement system in Puerto Rico is funded at 9%. It's underwater. It's done. They can't pay the retirees their pensions with the money that's in there. It's about ready to run out. So what UBS does is they are investment consultants to the retirement system. They tell the retirement system, hey guys, go issue these pension obligation bonds, POBs, so we can pay our retirees. They issue $2 billion, the retirement system does, of these pension obligation bonds. And UBS, as the underwriter, so they're a consultant to ERS, then they underwrite the bonds. They make $29 million underwriting these bonds, and they go to sell them on the mainland. Guess what? Nobody buys them. And UBS owns them as part of the underwriting syndicate. It's called firm commitment. They're required to buy the bonds and then sell them. They don't have where to go with them. So what they do is they stuff them into these closed-end funds that they can only sell to their clients and people in Puerto Rico. So they take this insolvent retirement system, they get paid as investment consultant, they get paid as the underwriter, then they stuff them in their own closed-end funds, which they're advisor to, they get paid there, and then they sell them to their own clients inside of these funds that are now down 50–60%. So that's an example of what's going on. It is tanking like a rock, and all on the backs of Puerto Rican investors and Puerto Rican predominantly retirees. It just devastated people's life savings.
Well, so basically UBS goes down to Puerto Rico. They say, hey, you're approaching retirement or you want to save for your retirement. Put your money into these bonds because there's very little risk of losing it. You'll get a much smaller percentage than, say, if you stuck it in the stock market, but it's going to be enough to support you, to keep you alive, to keep food on your table. And I think the big thing with bonds is that you don't ever expect to lose your money. I mean, bonds are relatively safe. I mean, obviously you can lose money in any investment, but these are supposed to be kind of the sure thing. You know you're not going to get rich off it, but you really shouldn't have to worry unless you fall victim to a predatory bank like UBS. And now when UBS then resells these closed-end funds to these retirees, did UBS know that this was going to fail?
There's no way that they didn't know that the probability of failure was off the charts. And here's why that they knew. In 2011, their sales staff, their financial advisors, comes to UBS Puerto Rico's leadership, specifically their chairman, Ferrer, and they give him a list of 22 reasons of why they don't feel comfortable selling these closed-end funds to their clients. There's 22 reasons. geographic concentration, illiquidity, the higher risk, and they said, we don't feel comfortable selling this. One of their financial advisors secretly records this tape. It's now been published. And what it is essentially is the UBS chairman bashing their sales force, selling, just sell the funds, sell the funds, sell the funds. In fact, if you don't sell them, you can't find a reason to sell them. Go get another job. Go find another job, he tells the sales advisors. He goes, you have to find some reasons to sell this fund. One of the senior financial advisors gets up and gives a speech that the Puerto Rican economy, you got to find some positives. So we all remember that TV show or that commercial, the proverbial go put some lipstick on this pig and sell it. I mean, this is about as Wolf of Wall Street type sales pitch. It's laden with just vulgarities, F-bombs, BS. I mean, it's one cuss word after another, stuff I wouldn't even feel comfortable repeating, just vulgar sales pitch, pressure on their sales force. And this is in 2011, and the decline didn't happen until 13, 14. So 2 years before, the financial advisors are saying 22 reasons why we can't sell, and they get pressure and told if you don't sell it, you can't find a reason to sell it, go get another job. So they knew unequivocally, and keep in mind, they had this crap on their books. They had to sell it. They had to get rid of it. They had both closed-end fund shares and these bonds that they had to sell. The proverbial put some lipstick on this pig. So they put this on the shoulders of their own clients, hardworking Puerto Ricans that own these investments, decades, lives of work into these investments to provide day-to-day income, food, rent, utility bills, car payments, and they put it in, and it's gone. It's evaporated. They knew. They pressured them to sell it. The facts are absolutely disgusting. We now represent over 200 retail and institutional investors on the island against UBS for the unsuitable investment advice, the conflicts of interest in these closed-end bond funds. And at this point, there's over 1,000 cases filed on the island in FINRA arbitration on these bond funds, Farron.
Well, a couple weeks ago, Eric Holder announced that he was going to give state attorney general and other forms of prosecutors 90 days to try to look into banking activity and see if prosecutions might be possible. I don't think any of us really are holding out much hope for this Justice Department to do anything, but I will point out something actually you brought to my attention a week or so ago, is that there is some hope in Washington right now coming from Representative Keith Ellison with this Investor Choice Act. In about a minute, can you tell us what that's about?
Absolutely. If you are an investor, I don't care if you live in Utah, North Dakota, or Puerto Rico, when you open an account with a brokerage firm, Merrill Lynch, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, doesn't matter, inside the fine print of the pages and pages you sign is an arbitration provision. And arbitration is an alternative to litigation or going in front of a jury or a court system in the states. And this FINRA arbitration provision, and FINRA is the self-regulatory agency that oversees the securities industry. So it's called self-regulation, or an SRO, self-regulatory organization. They sponsor an alternative to court in arbitration. And you sign when you open an account. So if you want to invest, you sign away your right to bring a claim in court, and you're stuck in FINRA arbitration. And what the proposed bill is that investors have a choice between FINRA arbitration or state courts. And at this point, it's supported by 30 different Democrats, 0 Republicans, and who can't support investor choice between court and FINRA arbitration?
Well, the people who can't support it are the people who are in office thanks to money from the banks, because we've talked about on the show many times, when you go to arbitration, the corporation, be it a bank, oil company, whatever, that company always has the advantage in arbitration, especially because of these arbitration clauses. A lot of times they're able to pick the arbitrators themselves, so you're forced to go in there with a panel of banking lawyers or bank-friendly judges or arbitrators. And so, this really helps to level the playing field. And, if we can get a little bit more support on this would make for a fantastic law, and certainly something Obama, I have no doubt, would sign would be a great end to his
absolutely.
presidency, and
I'll
it's something we desperately
be
need.
in D.C. Next week, where we have meetings set up with representatives from all over the country, bringing to their attention the fact that investors are stuck and bound in FINRA arbitration. So we have dozens of meetings. An organization I'm involved in, the Public Investor Arbitration Bar Association, or PIABA, has got meeting after meeting set up with dozens of representatives from around the country, bringing to their attention this injustice and the importance of this bill that should be bipartisan. It doesn't matter Democrat, Republican. This is about supporting Main Street and getting off the corporate teat of all the funding from Wall Street and the lobbyists, and let's support and get behind the constituents, the real constituents in Main Street.
Peter, good luck out there in Washington, and thank you for telling us the story today.
Thank you, Farron. Thanks for having me.
For most of America's largest corporations, the recession ended years ago, and they're back to setting records with regards to their yearly profits. And if trickle-down economics has taught us anything, it's that putting more money into the hands of the wealthy will mean more cash flow for the rest of the country. But trickle-down economics does not work, and the massive cash hoards that corporations are sitting upon are just being funneled back into the company. Joining me now to talk about this is Bryce Covert, the economic policy editor of Think Progress. So, Bryce, we have corporations now back once again to pre-recession level profits. Everything looks great if you're a corporation or a member of the 1%. Money is flowing in, hand over fist. What's happening with the money?
Well, it's definitely not flowing very much towards workers. As we saw in the jobs report that came out on Friday from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, wages have only grown at 2% over the past year over year. They grew by 0.01% last month. So wage growth has been really, really sluggish, particularly when you compare it to job growth. And a lot of economists are really puzzled by this. You know, as more people are getting jobs, as the job market tightens, we should expect that more people are getting money. But I think part of the answer lies in what companies are doing with the money that they're making. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that it's going to shareholders rather than workers or jobs or even investments in equipment and things like that.
Well, see, this is a prime example. You know, for decades, we've been sold this idea of trickle-down economics, that if we put more money into the system, that money is going to trickle down. And, you know, just as, David Stockman came out, one of the architects of trickle-down in recent years, and he said, look, whole thing's a sham. Trickle-down doesn't work. A lot of conservatives want to turn their heads and pretend they don't hear him say that. But now we really do see, we've seen it in practice for years and years now, money doesn't flow down. When you give these corporations, these 1%ers, more money, they spend it on themselves, really. They reinvest, they buy back their own stock, as your story points out on Think Progress. And when they do that, the money doesn't go really anywhere, does it?
Yeah, it's not a productive use of money unless you're a shareholder, basically. There's been a real shift since the 1980s to a model where before then, when companies made more money either through borrowing or through earnings, a lot of it was invested back into the company itself. About 40 cents for every dollar was going back in, and that could be wages or jobs. It could also be, equipment or research, whatever you need to sort of invest in for future growth. Instead, since the 1980s, the incentives have really shifted towards short-term profits, short-term stock market prices, and shareholder value, to the point where a dollar of extra money only means about 10 cents of investment, and instead payouts to shareholders, either by stock buybacks that inflate the stock price or dividends that give money straight to shareholders, have nearly doubled. And I think a lot of that shift has to do with the fact that everyone, including executives, because their compensation is tied to it, and shareholders themselves, are really focused on the short-term stock price. And there's just so much less incentive to be looking at the long-term investment. But honestly, I mean, that's going to obviously hurt workers if they're not getting more money for higher productivity, but I don't think it's good for companies either in the long run. If you're not investing in your own people, there was this quote in Bloomberg, there was just a record number of stock buybacks in February, and an investor basically said, look, shareholders want the short-term return. And if that means that you're growing your business less, so be it, which is kind of a crazy outlook.
It is. It's not sustainable. And part of the problem is the fact that you look back about 30 years ago, the average tenure of a corporate CEO was anywhere between about 15 and 20 years. Today, it's roughly 4 to 5 years. So these guys, when they make it to the top of the food chain there, they're not even looking years down the road. They don't care what's going to happen to the company in 6 or 7 years, because they know they've got, maybe half a decade at best to make as much money as possible for themselves and their shareholders, and then get out, leave the problems to the next guy. Sure, it can crash the economy because workers don't have enough money to buy the products to support the company to get us these profits. I mean, it's the worst possible business model that you can imagine. And it really, to me, seems like they're once again setting the economy back up for another massive collapse by not investing in the workers who really drive the economy.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. CEO term, I think, has something to do with this, as does just the way that their compensation is structured. More and more of it is sort of supposed to be tied to performance, which is a good idea in theory, I think. You want CEOs thinking about the performance of their company, but so much of it now is short-term performance that they are really incentivized to focus solely on that stock price. And if we were to move more towards a system where their compensation was tied to longer-term outcomes, we might see a shift in their behavior. I mean, it's a pretty rational way to act if that's the way that your pay is structured. I think that companies may actually be starting to sort of catch on to this. We saw Walmart, for example, announce a voluntary increase in its base wages. TJ Maxx is doing the same. They gapped it last year. There have been a couple of companies like this announcing that. We know, however, that if there weren't such a focus on shareholders, it could go a lot further. Walmart, for example, it could afford to pay all of its workers at least $25,000 a year if it just took all the money it spent on stock buybacks and instead invested in workers. And the analysis done by Demos that found this also pointed out that this investment in shareholders has not helped the company in terms of productivity or growth. On the other hand, it's really been suffering in its sales because of low customer experience, empty shelves, and that goes directly back to how they're treating their workers. So I think there's a much clearer line there between investing in the worker and just having a better company performance.
You hit a great point there with the minimum wage issue, and I know you've written a ton about it. So any of these companies, we've got about a minute and a half here. We've seen several companies step up and several states step up, increase minimum wages. Has there been any financial collapse of any company as a result of these minimum wage increase? I mean, what's been the result so far that we've seen?
So far, what we've seen actually is the opposite on the state level anyway. There was an analysis done at the beginning of the year that the states where they raised their wages either through legislation or voters voted it in, or there was some sort of automatic increase, were having above average wage growth, or job growth compared to those that didn't. It's a limited data set perhaps, but there's a lot of real-world evidence we've seen of this in the past when economists study state-level increases and then sort of compare it to neighbors and see how job growth did. There's really just not evidence that it means this huge collapse in jobs. And of course, like you said, we're now seeing individual companies doing it. It's yet to be seen if Walmart's going to just sort of, collapse in on itself, but I think they're pretty smart and savvy about making profit. I'd be really surprised if we see any sort of huge detrimental effect of raising its wages.
So from the evidence that we've seen over the years, we have empirical data that will show that trickle down does not work, but the data coming in now is showing that trickle up is certainly a much better way to build the economy. Bryce Covert, we're out of time, but thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on.
One of the only things that the Republican Party actually excels at is telling the American public what they need to be afraid of. At the heart of all their messaging is fear. The Republican Party needs the American public to be afraid because they know that fear leads people to make irrational decisions, like, say, voting Republican. So they've mastered psychological manipulation and they use it to their advantage. Joining me now to explain how this works is Howard Nations. Howard, I don't know about you, but I watch Fox News occasionally. It's a bad habit, but I have to know what the other side is saying. And all I get out of it is be afraid, be afraid, be afraid. Is that the only thing the Republican Party and their mouthpieces are really capable of telling us these days?
Well, it's be afraid, be very afraid, vote Republican. Well, you know, they're very smart because they understand the power of fear. And fear is a very powerful tool in our society. And right now, we have this culture of fear. As Barry Glassner described it in his book, we have a culture of fear where we fear the wrong things greatly out of proportion to the threat. And if you understand neuroscience and the whole concept of human cognition and risk perception, why do we perceive risk as we do? It comes down to this. Between logic and emotion and fear, fear is handled in the reptilian portion of the brain. The sole purpose of the reptilian portion of the brain is survival. So there's a saying in neuroscience that when there's a conflict between emotion and logic and fear, fear always wins, because fear is that portion of the brain is about survival, and that's our number one reason for existing, is survival. So if you want to manipulate people to get the results you want from the public, you choose the information that you want them to have and just repeat it and repeat it and repeat it and repeat it, so that when you need the instinct to occur, the instinct will be based upon the information they receive. Repetition is the most powerful teaching tool there is. Repetition is the basis of the availability bias.
And you know, a lot of that we do see in the corporate controlled media, because the fear generates ratings. That's why when there's a plane crash, we see so much about that. People do have an instinctive fear of flying. Some are more relaxed than others, but there's always a little bit there. And it is, as you pointed out, it's evolutionary. You know, it's part of our brain. It's what helped us survive and become what we are today. And it's something we haven't evolved past. And
right.
You know, evolution does take, millions of years, but as long as Fox News is around, they're not going to let us evolve past that. In fact, they're trying to almost revert us back to being afraid of everything. Don't leave your house, or if you do, you're going to be walking your dog and ISIS is going to hop out from the bushes and kill you. Or you're going to see a little kid in the park and get Ebola.
Yeah, that's only true if Ebola doesn't kill you first.
Yeah.
But, politicians have caught on to this, especially the right. I don't know why the left hadn't figured this out, but the right wing has certainly figured this out. Recently, we saw the example of Bibi Netanyahu addressing the Congress of the United States, giving a political speech for the folks back home. And his whole story is fear of war in Israel, fear of a nuclear attack from Iran. Okay, he is the conservative war leader of Israel. He's the far right winger in Israel, and he needs to keep them worried about nuclear war. They say it's a great speech. It should be a great speech. He's given the same speech for 20 years. So in the 90s, he was talking about Iran's going to have a nuclear weapon within a year or 2 years. And it's always been a year away every time he runs for office. But it was vote for me because Iran is going to get a nuclear weapon. The NRA, fear, you're going to take away our guns. People vote against their own interests. The tort reformers in corporate America absolutely understand this. You take, for example, medical malpractice reform. People have voted away their rights to sue doctors for their negligence, regardless of how bad the damage is that's caused by the doctors. The fear that they raised in Texas and other places across the country, they put up TV ads that the doctors are going to leave the state. I don't know where they're going to go because they're doing this in all the states. But they ran TV ads saying the doctors are going to leave. Because people, especially in the small communities, were thinking, well, we're not going to have medical care, they voted in basically malpractice exemptions They put the doctors above everybody else in society and said, no, you can't be sued. The result is today, malpractice in hospitals is the third leading cause of death in America, 440,000 deaths per year, because they have no liability. They've cut costs because they don't have to worry about being sued. They've increased their profits. They've increased their negligence, and they're killing people. But here's a good example of the availability bias, though. If you ask people, what causes more death in America, murder or malpractice, the answer is going to be murder. Why? Because murder is available to them. Murder they hear on TV all the time. They don't hear about one murder today in Houston. They don't hear about 400 people died in the hospitals today in Houston as a result of negligence. That's the power of the availability bias.
And so if we're looking at, 440,000 people a year from medical malpractice, that's more than 1,000 people every single day. So, yeah, if we turned on the news and we heard that 1,000 people in the United States alone were murdered, that would cause national panic, really. That's a lot of people. We're talking about the death toll of 9/11 every 3 days just from medical negligence. But as you point out, it's the selective information, what we're fed, from politicians, from the media, and we're fed that, especially for the Republicans, the Democrats can't keep you safe. They can't keep your children safe. They can't keep your bank account safe. And that's a huge fear right now, too, for most Americans, is that I don't have enough money to feed my family. I don't have enough money to get my car repaired if it breaks down. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And Republicans tell us, you have to vote for me. I'm going to fix it. But more than being worried about that, worry about these, people thousands and thousands of miles away in a country that you'll never go to, killing other people in that country. That's what we're sold.
They're selling terrorist attacks, Ebola, gun violence, climate change, fear of the other, fear of immigration, fear of all these immigrants coming into the country and taking over. The history of security states like Russia and Germany, what they do is they instill fear, and through that they control behavior and collect information. They issue propaganda, they issue misinformation. Hitler understood the availability principle very well. Hitler said, if you tell a lie often enough and repeat it often enough, people will not only begin to believe it, but they'll begin to repeat it themselves. That's the mantra upon which Fox News is founded, and they've reached the level of what they call cascading availability. They take the Republican talking points every morning and they repeat them over and over and over and over, and the fact that they're blatant lies has nothing to do with anything except manipulation, mass manipulation of the public.
And there's a fear machine on the right. Great authors have written about it in recent years, is that, it essentially it ends with Fox News, but it begins all the way down at the smaller level with the think tanks. They come up with these talking points, they test them, they focus them, and then they go on these TV shows, they talk about them. That spreads, it goes to the politicians, they say it, it's in the mouths of the Fox News hosts, the Alex Jones people who think we need to be afraid because the government's covering up aliens hiding out there, the Glenn Becks, the Bill O'Reillys. Everybody repeats this, but it all started way, way, way down there on the, Republican fear food chain. And that's something, not that we need to use the same tactics by any means, but there is no equivalent of that machine on the left. And there are issues that we probably should be afraid of. Global warming, climate change, that is something that we need to take very seriously. A lot of people don't realize how in danger they are from climate change. The city of Miami in 50 to 100 years won't exist because it will be underwater because we haven't taken action. But you don't see them out there saying that. You don't see them out there saying, people of Miami, stop voting for people like Marco Rubio who don't even believe that climate change is a thing. And they do it. We don't need to scare them or manipulate them like the Republicans do, but that is a truth. That's not a fear tactic. That's not psychological manipulation. That is a hard truth. And Republicans, they don't use the truth. do they?
Well, when you get the chairman of the committee that would be in charge of taking action on this, Senator Emhoff, standing on the floor of the United States Senate last week with a snowball that he found in Washington in February and saying that this is proof that there's not climate change, we're in serious trouble in this country, I'm telling you. You know, you talk about the start of it all, though. It really started with Justice Lewis Powell of the United States Supreme Court, a Nixon appointee, who wrote a memorandum called the Powell Memo. It was a memo to the Chamber of Commerce, in which he said, we, the business community, need to co-opt the media, schools, churches, universities, and he talked about how to do it. We need to rewrite the history in our own vein. It's been wildly successful, and that's what led to the Heritage Foundation and exactly the think tanks that you're talking about. That has now led to ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, which is passing uniform pro-business, anti-individual laws in states all over America. It's leading to plutocracy, which is government by the elite, government by the lobbyists for the rich. And, you know, Obama slowed plutocracy for a while, but now he honestly seems to be moving towards it. But they continue to attack Obama as a weak leader. He's responsible for ISIS. He's responsible for Ebola, vaccinations, immigrations, everything there is. And so the Republican mantra becomes Democrats can't protect America, so we need a good Republican war to protect America. Amazingly, last week, after 12 years of the debacle in the Middle East, 60% of the people in the polls said that we now want boots on the ground against ISIS. That's how successful they've been in raising the fear of ISIS. And I don't know, I looked around everywhere I drive. I'm like Senator Emhoff. I looked all over my office and didn't find anybody from ISIS. So
we just have a few seconds left, but fear is the main reason that George W. Bush got his second term.
No question.
The 2004 election was about nothing but fear and nothing about nothing but the fact that Senator John Kerry, he's not the guy to keep you safe. I kept you safe if you don't count that one thing that happened that one time.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we were sold. And unfortunately, the public ate it up because we were so terrified, because we were trained by these Republicans, by the Fox News noise machine, to be afraid. And Howard, this is a topic you and we could talk for a half hour on this. Unfortunately, though, we are out of time here. But thank you so much, and we will continue this another time.
My pleasure, friend. Thanks.
And that's it for this week's Ring of Fire, but you can keep up with us throughout the week online at ringoffireradio.com, on Twitter at Ring of Fire Radio, and on Facebook. I'm Farron Cousins, and we'll see you next week right here on Ring of Fire.